Hi, my name is Jerry, I'm a fantasy author, and in this series of videos, I'm trying to give you as much advice as I can about writing better descriptions for your narratives. Now, in the first video, we established the fundamentals of what we call interiority. That is to essentially allow your reader's mind to merge with that of your POV character, to see what they see, think what they think, feel what they feel. If you haven't seen that video, I will link to it up in the corner, and I would recommend that you start there because a lot of what I'll be talking about today very much builds on those principles. Now, this video will focus on two main areas. The first one being what I call the inherent intimacy of the senses, and the second one is controlling the imaginary camera. So what's the first one about? Well, if you have been reading or watching or otherwise consuming writing advice, then you have no doubt already been told that in order to make your descriptions more effective, you should invoke multiple senses besides just sight. Which is to say that besides describing how things look, you should also describe how they sound, how they smell, how they feel to the touch, etc. And that is completely valid, solid writing advice, but there is an aspect to it that I don't see people discussing very often. And to explain what I mean, I'm going to ask you to consider the following questions. First question, how close do you have to be to recognize someone by sight? Well, the answer is probably not very close at all. I mean, obviously, there are a bunch of variables here, like your own eyesight, as well as, light conditions or fog or whatever. But assuming that you have 20/20 vision and that there is nothing obstructing it, then you can recognize someone from at least a block away. And even if it's not someone you recognize, you can still make out quite a bit of detail about them. For example, their relative height and build, their presented gender, their hair and skin color, their style of clothing, their gait and their overall apparent mood, etc. You can glean all of that detail even when the person looks this big to you. By contrast, question number 2, how close do you have to be to hear someone speak? Again, disregarding any external factors, this can still be quite a bit of distance away, but in general, you will see a person and potentially recognize them much sooner than you will hear them. And then going one step further, or in this case, quite a few steps closer, number 3, how close do you have to be to smell someone? Well, I think we can agree that if you can smell someone from more than an arm's length away, that is a very strong smell and usually not a pleasant one. Being able to smell someone really crosses that sort of psychological threshold of feeling really, really close. Perhaps comfortably, perhaps uncomfortably so. And also speaking in broader context, if you step into a place like a cafe or a bakery and you can smell the roasted coffee or the freshly baked goods, that immediately makes you feel so much more present and so much more anchored in that place. And then beyond that, the 4th and 5th questions are kind of non-starters really, because if you can actually touch someone, then the distance between you is by definition 0. And if you can taste another person, well, I hope you're close in more than just a physical sense. And the reason all of this matters is because whether or not they consciously realize it, your readers are intuitively aware of these implied minimal and maximal distances, and their minds will apply that distance as they take in your description. And what this means for you as a writer is that by invoking different senses at different points in your description, you can knowingly manipulate the distance between your POV character and what you're describing, which of course will be the perceived distance between your reader and what you're describing. This is the same reason why it doesn't matter how lavishly you describe your main character's love interest, as long as all the details you give are purely visual, it will still feel like looking at a photograph rather than being in the presence of an actual person. If you just throw in a few details about how their voice sounds, or how they smell, or how they make the character feel on the inside, that will convey everything you've been trying to convey and so much more. There's a pretty straightforward example of this in my second book, where the characters are at a summer festival, and the description first begins with the size and scope of the event, then goes into the shapes and colors, then goes into the noises of the crowd, then goes into the smell of food in the air, And finally, later than that, goes into the actual flavors of that food, using different senses to gradually bring the reader closer and closer and closer to the POV character in the middle of this busy festival. But this is far from the only approach you can take. In my third book, there's an example of the complete opposite, where one of the characters has been knocked out and they're slowly coming to. First, they regain their sense of touch and just an overall awareness of their body. Then they start hearing voices around them, and then finally their eyes open and they see what they are. And speaking of level of detail, let's talk about our second topic, which is controlling the imaginary camera. And for this one, let me once again start with a bit of an exercise. If you had to describe my face to someone, what would you mention? The color of my hair, my glasses, my big nose, my bigger forehead, my dapper mustache. What you probably wouldn't mention, at least not at first, are this birthmark here, this one here, or even my ear studs, if you notice them at all. And the reason you wouldn't mention or even notice any of them is because these are the details you pick up on when you make an active effort to study someone's face. This ties into the ground rule of interiority, which we discussed in the first video. The things you describe are the things your character pays attention to, and the way you describe them are the way the character perceives them. What this means is that if you include all these tiny details in the description of a character that your POV character just met, well, that implies that your POV character is actively noticing all these things on someone that they just met. Now, this may come across in any number of ways. It could imply that those tiny details are really glaring, or it could mean that your character is very sharp and perceptive, or it could come across as kind of invasive and bordering on creepy. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with any of these effects. You just need to make sure as a writer that it is the effect that you were going for. Then, besides the, let's say, zoom level of this imaginary camera, there's also the question of where it's pointing and in what order. If you're describing a character head to toe or toe to head, then your POV character is either going like this or going like this, respectively. And this also means that if you spend a significant amount of time describing one body part, then yes, that does imply your character is spending a significant amount of time looking at that body part. This also applies to describing places. The most natural progression in this case is to just start at one point in the room and then slowly pan your imaginary camera all over your character's surroundings. This is perfectly serviceable, but by no means your only option. By shifting your focus as well as the level of detail you go into when describing things, you can convey what your character is looking at and how much attention they're paying to it. And this variation of focus and level of detail can also tie into another rule of interiority, which is writing with empathy. If, as previously mentioned, you simply pan your camera over the surroundings, then that's what your character is doing. They are just slowly looking around and taking things in. Conversely, by shifting your focus all over, you can convey that your character is curious or excited or maybe even nervous. Their eyes are darting around the room looking for escape routes. Lastly, once again, going back to the rules of interiority, always remember to write with conviction. If there are things that you as the writer know that the character is misinterpreting, then make sure you describe your character's interpretation, not yours. And that's it for part 2. What are your favorite tips for descriptions? Is there something I missed? Is there something you disagree with? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, make sure you check back for part 3, and until then, stay tuned.